Breath of Life presents Relentless Pursuit with Pastor Walter L. Pearson, Jr. Join us now as Pastor Pearson continues his message on Samson entitled Hanging by a Thread.
Folk, let me tell you what I know to be true. Once you set out on a course that is against God, you are out of your mind. In fact, one day when you look back on it, you will say to yourself, I was out of my mind. I should never have done that. But the course that you take away from God takes you out of your mind. And so now a strange thing has started. They find out what he did to get these clothes. They find out that there's some strange enmity that is developed, and they say, we will then burn your wife and her father's house. When Samson gets disturbed, he can do things. So the first thing that he does is that he backs away from that wedding, and another person is put in his place. The father of the bride, once Samson leaves, gives another man to his daughter. Samson comes back eventually. The father says, I thought you were gone. I didn't think you would come back. So what I did, I gave your wife away to your best man. Why don't you take my next daughter, a younger one? He says, I don't like this plan. So when he gets disturbed about that, he goes and does something that only a powerful man can do. He goes and catches 300 jackals. Foxes, the Bible calls it. But the scholars have discovered that foxes don't stay together in those big packs. Jackals do. How do you catch 300 jackals? How do you hold them when you catch them? What do you do? Grab tails and just hold them together? Well, if you're Samson, it's no problem. He catches them, and then he puts firebrands between tails of two at a time, and then turns them loose in the fields of corn that the Philistines depend on to eat, and burns down their food supply. Folks, this is a problem. You got no more olives. You got no more corn. And so the people are quite angry. And when he finishes, he goes to Judah. These are people who are under the direction or under the control of the Philistines, and goes to the rock Etam and goes into a cave to stay there. And after that experience, the Philistines say, where is he? And you know, you can't depend on the brethren all the time. So they say, well, we know where he is. Ask the Levites where he is. He went to their country. Okay, so they go and make a deal. Say, look, we can't go get him. You know, he's got special skills. Would you bring him out to us? And his brethren, 3,000 of his brethren, go to him. One of my favorite writers says that if those 3,000 people who went to deliver Samson to the Philistines had come with the determination to stand on God's side, they could have freed the people. But they were so afraid. Their backbones were so malleable. They could barely stand. So they got together and said, Samson, you got to go out there. We got to take you and deliver you. Say, hey, man, you forgive me, but I see it in modern terms. Can you see, Samson? So you guys came to turn me in. Is that what you came to do? And y'all feel pretty good about that? Can you sleep tonight when you turn me in? They say, yeah, we can sleep tonight. We're not going to let them attack us. We got friendships with these people. These folk have given us peace. We are not about to break up our situation for you. Come on, we're going to tie you up. What shall we tie you with? He said, well, you tie me with some green cord. I can't break out of that. And they take him to the Philistines. And they said, Samson, you're not going to kill us while we're taking you. He said, no, I don't bother y'all. You're already miserable enough. Come up here to deliver me instead of doing what God calls you to do. You stay in your own misery and stew in it, marinate in it. But when they get close to the Philistines, they are overjoyed. They say, hey, his own people are bringing him here. And they shout. They are so happy. And Samson comes all the way down until he gets close to him. And then he does what you suspect he's going to do. Breaks the cords and grabs the next thing he can find, which turns out to be the jawbone of a donkey. I can't imagine it doing harm to anybody unless I'm Samson. Then I can take anything. In fact, I could almost take nothing. But he takes this bone that is not dried and begins to kill people with it until 1,000 of them are dead. And this man is in trouble. Now, here is what you must know. Samson's vow as a Nazirite has 3 provisions. Can't approach a dead body. Can't take anything into his body that comes from the fruit of the grape, and cannot cut his hair. The scholars believe that by the time we get to this place in the story, he has already had wine. They believe that he has already come close to many dead bodies. So the only provision he's got left is that he hasn't had his hair cut. He's hanging by 1/3 of his vow. And here is my question to you. When does God cut you loose? If I were God, at 2/3, I'd have cut him loose. I don't think he deserves my loyalty. He's no longer the man that I sent. But in that moment, when he had brought that partial victory, his people made him a judge. And listen to this. For 20 years, God allowed Samson to judge Israel, that part of Israel that was within those boundaries. And then the Bible says that 20 years later, and I want to say this to you because there are some of us who have grown old, and we love to talk about the terrible things young people do. Lord, help these young people. Where do you think they learned what they do? These young folk. If only God had to worry only about the young people. If only those were the only folk who violated his command. There are some people who have grown old who have no longer the energy to act on their evil thoughts. Forgive me, I didn't mean to be mean-spirited. But you still got evil intent. Man looks on the outward appearance, God looks on the heart. So he knows. So if you have been like Samson, a good person for a long time, don't let it go to your head. Samson, for 20 years, was a judge. And then one day something started nagging at him. Went down to Gaza for no particular reason. Goes into Gaza and sees a prostitute. This judge of God's house. And I know folk think that all of this new stuff about holy people, you think that it's something phenomenon that has just cropped up. It has always been so that Satan picks on those whom God has chosen to do his will. He puts his most excruciating pain upon them, and he uses his greatest powers against them. He lifts up their temptations. He offers them things that regular folks never even know, because it brings him joy to bring somebody down whom God has chosen. Right now, somebody listening to me doesn't understand that the reason why you are having it so hard is because God had a plan for your life. And the devil knows it. So he works on you much harder. Samson is in Gaza, sees the prostitute. Why in the world would a man of God do this? But he goes and he's in her place. And what he doesn't know, and what you need to know, is that while you are going against God, there are people who are watching you. They don't act like they know you, but they're watching you. Hey, how you doing? They don't want to give you a hint. But when God has put his hands on you, there's something about you that you can't hide. You didn't hear me. The microphone went out just then, and you didn't hear what I said. When God has a purpose for your life, there's something about you that stands out. And when it stands out, people will treat you differently. Sometimes it will help you. Other times when the devil comes after you, it will be the greatest burden of your life. But they're always watching. Not only are people watching. What I've discovered is that it is not God trying to catch us doing wrong. God is not willing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. The one who's watching you is the devil. He is the accuser of the brethren. He's not the one on your side, so he tells you stuff to do. Then he sends every Christian in town to the place where you're in trouble. Don't you think that it was some accident that in this place where Samson had gone to be with this woman whom he never should have touched, that the people didn't know? In fact, the Philistines got together and they said, hey, I knew he couldn't last. 20 years. You thought he'd never break down again, didn't I tell you? He'd be back. Right down there in Gaza. See that house right down there with that funny looking roof? He's in there. And guess what? In the morning when the sun rises, we will have enough forces around that house to take him. He's a dead man. So let him have the night. I'm going to tell you how good God is. In a house of ill repute, Samson is asleep, unconscious. And all of a sudden, something rouses him. Do you think it was the devil? He would have gotten great joy in having a sunrise capture. Who was it then? And I know some of you have to stretch your brain to figure this out because you think God is so vengeful that as soon as you do something wrong, God is after you. And what I've been trying to tell you for this series is that God is not against you. It is divine power that chases you, trying to bring you back to where you belong. God is not trying to force you out. God is trying to bring you in. He will do things that you can't imagine to try to get you back before it's eternally too late. So at midnight, something shakes Samson. You can think what you think. I know what shook him. There may have been a dream that woke him up, but I know who sent the dream, because God is always looking to try to bring you back, to let you live within the power of his love. And so the man wakes up for no reason at all. And when he wakes up, he senses what's going on. You can't have all those thousands of people around without being aware of it. I don't know what does it. Maybe somebody stepped on a twig. Maybe some horse in the corner. Samson said, wait a minute. Something's going on. So he leaves the house, knowing that thousands of eyes are on him. And when he gets to the gate of Gaza, it's locked. But if you're Samson, and if God loves you enough to shake you awake at midnight, then that same power will give you the strength to get out of the town. So while the doors are locked, he does not open them. He picks them up. Not just the doors, but the hinges. Those things that hold the doors, to the pinnings of the doors. Pull them up out of the places where they've been digged. And he puts them over his shoulders and walks up the hill with the gates. And somebody wakes up. Hey, who is that? Well, that's not a person. I don't know what that is. Are those the gates? somebody under them? They're moving up the hill. Yeah, I told you. We shouldn't have waited till morning. We should have caught him now. Now, folks, stick with me because I got to show you something that will tend to build up my former declaration. When you turn against God, you are out of your mind. If that happens to you, if you pick up the gates and go free, when you get home, don't you want to say, Lord, I'm sorry. Forgive me. I messed up. But after that deliverance, I know you got me out of there. I'm going to stay with you for the rest of my days. But it is not long after that that Samson spies a woman in the vale of Zorah. Her name means devourer. Maybe you ought to check into the meaning of the names of people. A woman named Devourer. But he goes to her, and they begin to have genteel conversation. And the Philistines learn that he has an eye for her, so they come to her. It doesn't seem that she's a Philistine woman, but someone from another culture. And they say, we will pay you to find out what makes him strong. Oh, forgive me, but I don't read this stuff like ink stains on paper. I ask God to take me to the place. I feel like I've been there when she was telling him, you're a good-looking man. I've heard about you, but the half was not told. Not only are you strong, do you mind if I touch your bicep? Nobody said you were good-looking. Why don't we get to know each other? What makes you so strong? I've always wondered that. Is there any way I could get you to tell me what it really is? He said, oh, sure. A woman like you? I'll tell you anything. Well, why don't you tell me right? Why don't we start off this relationship with something that builds trust between us? Why don't you tell me something you've never told anybody before? Why don't you tell me what it is that would make you as weak as a regular man? He said, that's simple. All you got to do is get some green lengths and tie me up with them. They've never been used before, and I'll turn into a natural man. Now, folks, when she ties you up while you're asleep, this is not rocket science. When she ties you up, when you wake up, I don't know, when she says the Philistines are upon you, and no problem, you break out of the stuff and say, what's going on, girl? I know you ain't called these folk in here, did you? But by now they're gone. She said, but you lied to me. How can we have trust, Samson? How can we ever build a relationship if you're not going to tell me the truth? Come on. Right now, why don't you well, I'll tell you what, don't do it now. Let me just take care of you for a few days. I could be more explicit, but you couldn't handle it. I could tell you what happened after that. I know what happens when the devil blends his wisdom with the intent of somebody who does not love God. You can be in the presence of someone who has more power than you believe, not because they are smart, but because the devil is using them. You got to be careful with whom you associate. There are people who are looking regular, but they are not. He says, how about 2 new ropes? She ties him up with that. The Philistines are upon you. Cracks them and breaks them and gets up. And then eventually he gets tired. If you continue to play games with ungodly people, your resolve will evaporate. Tell you what you do. In fact, I've never told anybody this before. If you take the 7 locks of my hair, and you see that weave you got over there? Weave my hair like you do cloth. And then put the pin in there and kind of lock me into that whole mechanism over there. And if you call anybody then, I'll be as weak as I can be. And sure enough, he can't be asleep. It's too uncomfortable for him. But after she has stuck in all of the mechanism and his hair is completely locked, she says, the Philistines be upon you. And he, by his hair, the man's got strong hair. By his hair, he pulls up the mechanism. And she says, but sweetheart, you lied to me. How are we ever going to love each other? And you think this is ridiculous, but I believe somebody is listening to me right now who is just as foolish, who has let somebody get way into their lives. And then one day it happens. He's too tired. She wakes him up and, sweetheart, let me just massage you. These muscles are amazing. Tell me, baby. I'm starting to think it may have something to do with your hair. You know, that last thing you told me. I thought we were getting warm. Were we close? He said, well, I'll tell you what it is. If you cut my hair, that's the last thing that connected him to his vow. He was hanging by a thread until then. And now that's gone. She puts him to sleep on her lap. And while he is asleep, she calls in someone with a razor. They take the locks of his hair and begin to shave him off. Says, all right, let's check him now. And she said, Samson, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And he says, I will rise and shake myself like I did before. I will get up and be as strong as I was before. But when he gets up, he knows that something has left him. It is more than he imagined. He did not know that he had hung by the last thread and cut it, and now he had nothing. Listen, one of my favorite writers says that if somebody had made his hair be cut without his will, he would have been just as strong. The power was not in the hair. The power was in the commitment to God. When you break every thread that connects you to God, it is then that you've given away the best thing that you have. And don't fool yourself. Sometimes when you think someone loves you because of what you look like or because of your talents or your skills, it is none of the above. It is your connection with God that makes you attractive. And what that person wants most is to play with that connection. It's something they don't have, but something you have. And there you are, cutting every connection you have with God. And they took that man away and gouged out his eyes and put him at a grinder, and he ground grain. And they laughed at him until that day. You remember what happened. He had been grinding corn as his hair grew back, but I want to tell you something. It was not the regrowth of the hair. It was his recommitment to God. See, don't reduce religion to icons. This is not a cartoon. This is not some strange story you saw on HBO. This is the power of God in action. So as that man grinds corn, he finally comes to his senses and says, God, I can't see with these eyes anymore, but my heart has new eyesight. I can see now that the only thing I ever had was you. And I cut you off. And I want to beg of you, Father, if I never do anything for you again, just forgive me for what I've done. And he recommitted his life to God. And as his hair grew back, it had little, I believe, to do with the recommitment. But one day they took him down to play the final sport in that temple where Dagon was, the fish god. a God that looked like half fish and half man. And on that day, says one of my favorite writers, it was no longer a contest between Samson and the Philistines. It was a contest between the fish god and the God of heaven. Listen, the only real thing you can do with your life is to put it on the side of God. The only lasting thing, the only positive thing that you can do, the only meaningful thing that you can do with your life is to put it on God's side. This man finally does it, and you remember what happened. He goes out and they're laughing and they say, look, the powerful man who wounded and killed so many of our people, look at him now. And they brought him out. There were 3,000 people on the roof. And he said, I'm feeling woozy. I'm a little dizzy. Could you take me to that place I've heard you've got where I could just lean on the pillars? He knew that they were close enough together so that he could get his hands on both of them. It was the primary support of that temple. He had just enough space to push the pillars. And he decided, no matter what happens to me, I will die obeying my God. I will die trying to get back some of the luster that I took away from his name. And he pushed the pillars, and it came tumbling down. And I know some of you say it was suicide. And some of you say, well, if that's the way he went out, how can you give us his story and try to make us come to God? And I direct you to Hebrews, the 11th chapter. It is a place where the greatest heroes for God have their names recorded. When you get to verse 32, you will find in a list of names the name of Samson.
Join us next time for more Breath of Life.
The Breath of Life television ministry proudly presents a special gift offer this week, The Desire of Ages. The life story of the greatest spiritual leader the world has ever known, Jesus Christ. Desire of Ages goes in depth into events surrounding the life of Jesus, giving you more meaning and a clearer picture of his impact on the world and those who choose to follow him even to this day. In these uncertain times, Desire of Ages gives direction for all who seek it. The book answers hard questions confronting us all. It examines basic spiritual truths, gives hope and encouragement for tomorrow, and brings you face to face with the Savior. Just call our toll-free number, 877-BOL-OFFER. That's 877-265-6333, and ask for your copy of Desire of Ages. The book is yours for a gift of $5 or more, or you may write to Breath of Life, P.O. Box 97192, Washington, D.C. 20077. The Desire of Ages. It's the greatest story ever told in a whole new light.